Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the BlkWmnAnimator, coming back to you with another video. And in this video, I have August Alondra Davies. Welcome.
Hey, Deborah, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. It's great to be here.
Just give me a little intro about yourself.
Hi, I'm August Alondra Davies. My pronouns are they, them, their. I'm an animations supervisor. I've worked in multimedia, games, television, film, and I'm about to start a new job. I just finished a decade at Sony PlayStation.
Nice. So my first question, where are you from and how was it growing up?
I am from Washington, D.C. originally. I grew up in Chevy Chase, Maryland, which, to the best of my knowledge, has nothing to do with the actor, unless he named himself after the city, which is probably also unrelated. Yeah, I grew up in a middle class neighborhood, maybe upper middle class. Everybody in the neighborhood was wealthier than us. We weren't wealthy. We just lived in a nice neighborhood. I grew up with the understanding that I was a cisgender male. A lot of things didn't really resonate with that, but I didn't have the language or experience to identify with, who I truly am. So it took me all the way until my late 40s to actually figure that out and embrace. Well, yeah, embraced, I guess. Fully embraced. I sometimes joke, and this is, I'm not looking for sympathy here, but I sometimes joke that I'm at the loneliest corner of intersectionality, because even though both my parents were Black, I'm obviously light skinned. I wasn't wealthy, but lived around a bunch of wealthy people. I wasn't Black enough for Black people. I obviously wasn't anything other than Black to anybody else. And I was a nerd. I was, part of an unpopular enclave. And the one kind of constant in my life was that I liked to draw. Beyond that, I was into music, took piano for a while. I even took ballet. Nice. The school that my sister went to, I have a sister who's 4 years younger than me, and worlds more mature. She was taking ballet at a place called Jones Haywood School of Dance, which was Black, a prestigious Black ballet studio in DC, and they needed men. They needed male dancers. So my parents kind of, would you be interested? Kind of hoping that I wouldn't. And I was like, sure. I think in my core, it's like, something like I love to dance, and it kind of felt, like, yeah, why not? But I also did think, I'll be surrounded by girls, So, I did okay in school. I wasn't really scholarly. I was into sci-fi. I was into animation, anything animated. I wanted to see. I wanted to do. I wanted to, find out about. And my parents were very supportive. They actually would take me to anything that was animated. Once I got close to teenager, it didn't even matter. Like they would let, it was animated, and it's like, I don't think I'm supposed to be watching this, but
so your parents were the people who like the parents that was taking their child to Rango and Sausage Party.
Right. Actually, funny story, not animation related. I won't name drop, especially on people in my personal life, but you know, I had a girlfriend who I dated. Our moms were friends, which was a strike against me. But we went to see An Officer and a Gentleman. That's how old I am. And my parents chaperoned, and it was already kind of odd being on a date with your girlfriend, with your parents like 4 rows up, you know, but then it's like that movie is definitely, you know, not for young viewers. So yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. So, what was your journey in art and animation during your childhood?
I think one thing that was really first things first. My aunt, the late great Georgia Kaiser. I'll name drop my family, whether they're embarrassed or not. And you know, she's looking she's looking down from above. But my mom's side of the family, like, they're just full of educators. My mom was a teacher. My aunt was a teacher. My grandmother was a dean of a school. You know, my aunt, when I went to Montgomery County school system, and we had a lot more holidays than the DC public school system. So whenever we had a holiday, I would end up going to my mom's school, which was always interesting, you know. But they were very strict at that school, and I was not good with strict. And I was under a magnifying glass because, you know, I was a teacher's son, so that was very awkward.
Yeah.
But the point that I was getting at was that once I went and was at my aunt's. I can't remember. I want to say school, but she also did like she did something that was akin to homeschooling. She was in the school system, but there was a period. I'm pretty sure I was at her home, and she noticed that I put shoulders and fingers on my people at a very young age when that was not common, and so she encouraged my parents to keep me drawing, and so, you know, I don't remember them like actually saying like, here, draw, you know, but they definitely didn't discourage me. And I remember one year for my birthday, I really wanted a green machine, which they still exist. I think they had this amazing design when I was growing up. I mean, even looking back, I'm like, those are really nice. They changed it up, and I don't know. But anyway, I reproduced a picture of a green machine from a comic book I was reading. I love comics, and my parents were so blown away, you know, and like that was one of the high water marks in my early drawing career that I remember. And I got the green machine, which was great. But I mean, I drew all kinds of stuff. There were, I mean, I'm sure this is, I just put this delicately. I drew things, mostly things that a young nerd geek would draw. But there was a period where I was kind of internally exploring my sexuality. And I did some erotic art that my mom found, and I tried to play it off like one of my friends drew it, because I had other friends who and, you know, my mom, of course, you know, had a kind of don't ask, don't tell mentality. She was always afraid I was gay, which I'm not. I'm pansexual, for anyone who wants to know. But she, you know, she just kind of was like, oh, okay. You know, and it's like, yeah, okay. But yeah, I early on, I realized, like, not early on, like high school, computer graphics started becoming prevalent. Computer animation became prevalent, and I really wanted to be an animator, but I didn't want to do all those drawings for traditional, which was still huge at the time, and or at least huge as it could be
Right.
in America. And I didn't want to do.
Right.
I didn't want to do. I mean, I didn't program, so I was just like, well, so much for animation. And when I went to college, I
Right.
wanted to do illustration, and they didn't have an illustration. I went to Howard University, and they at the time didn't have an illustration curriculum. So I ended up taking experimental studio, and we can. I don't know if you want to come back to this later, but that's how I ended up getting a job in computer graphics. What was the question?
Your journey in art and animation. So you're answering it.
All right. So yeah. So and then so
well, in your childhood.
Yeah. Childhood wise, I did have friends who drew. I had friends who did like cartoon style stuff, friends who did, fantasy and sci-fi stuff, and, kind of this wide range of focuses and skill levels. And, it was interesting because like all the other artists I know, they're like brutally competitive, like, drawing horrible pictures of each other and, doing all kinds of crap like that. And I think like we kind of made fun of each other, but for the most part, it was just, we just got together and drew, like we'd collaborate and, do all that kind of stuff. And, I'm trying to think of something else that was, I remember when I was like in elementary school, I got in trouble. And my teacher called my parents, which was the only thing I was afraid of. I would, act out. I would, I'd wild out. I'd have tantrums, and once they said, all right, we're calling your parents, I was just like, oh no, now I'm actually in trouble. But I remember this teacher, Taylor, who, sorry, Mr. Taylor, I'm not worried about embarrassing you. He like sent me to the coat room because like I would just keep drawing in class and not paying attention. And like he called my mom, and my mom was like, rip them up. And he was like, no, they're so beautiful. The drawings are so beautiful. And I mean, as elementary school, they were, they were good, I guess. But she was like, no, rip them up. Like my mom didn't play that. I remember this one kid. There was this French kid who was in school with us, and he could not be told anything other than what he believed. And he believed he was the best artist in the world. And our classmates pitted us against each other. We weren't friends, but he just talked all the smack, and they were like, no, and they encouraged me to like have a draw off with him. And I remember his drawing vividly. I don't even remember what I drew, but he drew like basically like if you took a Don Hertzfeld animation and just gave the limbs thickness, Don Hertzfeld is amazing, a genius, but it's stick figures, and that's part of the genius of it. But I mean, he basically did a filled out stick figure with like an Abraham Lincoln hat that had this fat brim on it. It was really like it's just like two rectangles on top of each other, and he just swore up and down that he won, and I remember kind of like withdrawing, and everybody else was just egging him. I mean, like trying to call him out, but he wouldn't be called out. And now that I think about it, those are two lasting impressions for me. One was like I tell people I'm an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. I don't know if I made that up, or I think I got it from someone, but I have no idea who. But the thing about it is, like, if people are praising me, that gives me the space to be like, oh no, and it's not like, it's not false modesty, to the degree that, I constantly don't feel like I'm as good as people say I am. But it is, like, if I don't get accolades, I'm like Kanye. I'm like, these MFs that much better than me? What? So, like, that was one of the things, I think, them cheering me on and me not even wanting to be a part of it. I think that, like, that, like, really just gelled in my mind that, I'm supposed to wait for accolades. And, like, anytime, I get crickets, I'm like, oh no, I failed. Whether it's the truth or not. But the other thing is, and this is really, I mean, these are all things that I feel like are a little bit damaging. And, again, not looking for sympathy, just trying to be as transparent as possible. The fact that this kid, Philip, could not be told that he wasn't as great as he thought, that makes it hard for me to embrace even how good I think I am, because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the one who's like, no, I'm great. I'm great. And everybody's like, are they looking at what I'm looking at? So, and sadly,
because I guess his art was probably stilted by doing that, because it wasn't as good as he thought he was.
I would love to know what he's doing now. I don't remember his last name, so I just remember he had like this thick accent and he talked a lot, and his name was Philip. That's all I remember. Other things art-wise, my mom started hiring me to do greeting cards.
Nice.
And this was another significant thing, and I didn't learn this until college, but I felt like I had an obligation to do anything artistic that was put in front of me because I had the ability. I used to hand do calligraphy because I didn't know anything about calligraphy pens. And,
nice.
Like I remember like duplicating the Washington Post font for the letterhead for the masthead to do calligraphy, and eventually there was this, my parents bought us encyclopedias. I don't know if it was, I know they wanted us to be educated. They wanted us to have exposure to stuff, but I do kind of now in retrospect, I wonder if they didn't get, conned by a bunch of encyclopedia salespeople. But one of the ones that I really liked was I think it was Childcraft is what it was called. And, I'll come back to that, but there was a thing with calligraphy, and they had this style called German block letter. And it was at once simpler than the Washington Post font, but far more elegant, in my opinion. It was very fluid. It was ornate, even though it didn't have the same complexity. And so, like, that became my thing, is using German block letter, or my approximation of it. But my mom would have me do these greeting cards, and I hated it. I think like the first time, maybe I was like, I did something. They loved it. Yay. And then after that, I'm like, another one? Oh my God, no, not more. And I hand lettered everything. So like I'd do something like reproduce a drawing of, a photo of a rose. I'd, draw the rose, and like I had like go-to flowers that, oh, you want flowers? Okay, here's the image that I like. And it wasn't until college, there was this guy who did signs, and basically he just hand wrote, like, in nice handwriting, not calligraphy, with the calligraphy pen, and he would knock these signs out. Like, you could sit there and watch him, and he'd be finished with it, in the space of a conversation, and he was getting paid for that. And I was like, what the? So that was like me learning about calligraphy pens. And I drew for the campus newspaper, the Hilltop. And I had like, people comparing me to the previous artists. And funny thing was, like, there was an artist, they have, I guess they call them not stacks, I forgot what they call them. They have these big bound books of all the previous issues of the paper.
Yeah.
And this guy named Mark Williams, late and great, who, you know, like I was just scouring the stuff, and like his style just resonated with me. I thought he was amazing, and like he inspired me. And, you know, later on, I actually had the great pleasure of working with him, which was kind of weird because like I was his boss, and I was like, dude, you inspired me. What the, but yeah, like I don't remember where. I think because I drew at the campus newspaper and had the freedom, like they basically were like, make something cool. I think that when I finally got the idea that, you know, I can work on what I want to work on.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, so I stopped doing lettering. I just, you know, focused on illustration. But going back to the encyclopedia thing, one of the things that, you know, in the digital age that I really miss is the big color photos. My parents also got National Geographics, and we had like just a bookcase full of National Geographics, and like, you know, the full color photos, and like, you know, being able to see the details and all that, you know, and then, especially in the early ages of Al Gore's internet, you know, everything was like postage stamp size, you know, so like you zoom in, it's like, well, I'm not drawing pixels, you know. So other than that, you know, drawing at the campus newspaper was good for me because that, you know, was very deadline oriented, but I still had too much freedom. You know, I tell my my manager, Maya Crown Williams, who hopefully is watching this, that don't give me any slack. Don't, no. If the client doesn't need it till Tuesday, tell me they need it this week. You know, tell me they need it Friday. You know, because I will wait till Monday night and like frantically work on it. And like I used to do that at the campus paper. You know, we'd go to press on Fridays. Oh, we go to press on Thursday night, and the paper would go out Friday morning. And half the time I didn't even walk into the building. It was this old house it was like an old big row house, 2 stories with a basement. It's gone now. They have a building, I think, like on the other side of the campus. But I wouldn't be in there until like at earliest Wednesday, but usually Thursday night, frantically drawing everything that was supposed to be in the paper. And there were times when I had to go up to the printer, which was actually closer to my parents than it was to Howard. And I'd be up there, and this woman named Flo who ran the presses, and she'd be like, "You almost finished, baby." You know, and I'm sitting there, almost there, Flo. You know, but yeah, sadly, I never really learned that lesson.
So, what made you decide to go to a HBCU, and what was your HBCU experience?
My parents made me decide to go to an HBCU. Thankfully, you know, living in the suburbs, you know, being so removed, like a handful of my best friends in high school, like, all right, so in elementary school, going up all the way into high school, you know, we used to joke that we were, I don't know what we said. I don't remember when Jesse Jackson came up with the Rainbow Coalition, but we were like the Rainbow Coalition because we were like a Jew, a Korean, a Peruvian, a Black kid, and a self-described WASP. You know, that was kind of my world. You know, I interacted with Black people, but, you know, they weren't in vast abundance. There were more in high school. And then I had my best friends who became my groomsmen. That's when, for whatever reason, I started hanging out with Black people. And like it was like Trevor Royal, his brother Mark, they were kind of the fly ones. They were the ones who were always, you know, talking to girls and actually dating. There was Dwayne Pierce and his brother Sean. You know, that was the core group. And, you know, we go to the arcade and, you know, I was never as good as them at anything. And, you know, we would snap on each other. We would, as we say, Joan. And I got really good at that, hanging out with them, which it got to a point where I would just not open my mouth because I would say something that would either, you know, have somebody wanting to fight me or have somebody like, you know, why you gotta go there, man? I mean, you know, so, but I forgot what the question was.
Oh, going to HBCU and your HBCU experience.
So the HBCU. What happened? I hated school. I didn't, you know, I didn't want to be in school. I didn't want to, you know, the only thing I did well on are SATs, and that's because my face was in encyclopedias. I had a biology class with this guy named Mr. Schneck. He smoked a pipe, and he was an interesting gentleman. And I remember one time Tommy Davidson, the comedian, came to town, and he actually went to my high school. And so, like, I called up the radio station and we talked about Mr. Schneck. But when it came time for me to graduate, first of all, because I was such a poor student, I was shocked when I graduated. I really thought I wasn't going to make it. And I was like, all right, yeah, I did all right. And then some of the people that came across the stage after me, I was like, maybe I didn't do so good. Maybe there was something else going on here. But you know, I was like, I don't want to go to college. And my mom was like, you're gonna go to college. and you know, and she insisted that I submit to Howard. I was kind of going to say, like, my parents had us do stuff. You know, she would always make sure that we were aware of our culture and that we did, you know, cultural things. So I never had that kind of like, you know, you're just an angry black guy. You know, I never had that. You know, I was still a nerd, and people called me an Oreo, but you know, I was proud to be black. I knew a little bit about being black. And I don't know why my mom, I think somebody actually suggested to my mom that I apply there. And I literally got in on the strength of my portfolio. They were like, we're going to put you on academic probation. And, you know,
immediately.
yeah, like I came in on academic probation. And I was scared to death my first semester. And so I like paid attention. I did, you know, I did reasonably well. I did well in my art classes. And, you know, I got good grades. And I was like, oh, this is easy. And then like I just had a 4-year decline where, you know, by the last year, I was like out in front of the school playing hacky sack. You know, sometimes with people who are now stars, you know, I went to school with a lot of people who are like, you know, like big, like named stars, like, you know, Puffy and Anthony Anderson. And, you know, and there are times when I'm like, maybe I didn't do everything I could have done. You know, I'm very proud of what I've accomplished. I'm proud of, like, you know, the responsibility and trust that people put in me. I'm really thrilled about the opportunity to help people in their career. But at the same time, I'm like, I could deal with being wealthy and known. You know, outside of my community, outside of my professional community. But yeah, I didn't even finish school. I left. which I'm not advocating. Kids, stay in school, don't do drugs until you grow up. I mean, don't do drugs. I actually took a computer graphics course, and the teacher went on sabbatical. The professor went on sabbatical, and her replacement was a hardware and software salesman. And it was computer graphics, but he decided he was going to teach animation history. So this was like preordained for me to have my inroad, because he didn't know a lot about animation. So I'd be like, no, that was Sleepy Beauty with self-inked lines, and and he like he would go, okay, all right, yeah, all right. And, he was very patient, and he appreciated the feedback, but I gotta believe that it didn't that he was like, oh God, but he came and he told the whole class, like, hey, one of my clients is looking for an artist. I think you all should apply. And no one did, which was freaking terrible. And he actually called me at home and was like, I really think you should go in for this job. And I remember a good friend of mine, I'm not going to drop his name. He's a lawyer. He's a freaking amazing guy, but his then girlfriend braided my hair. She gave me cornrows, and they didn't last long because I couldn't take the discomfort associated. But I went in for an interview. I dressed nicely, but I had cornrows. My mom was like, "You're never going to get a job with your hair like that." And I went in at like 10 in the morning on a Friday and didn't leave till 3 in the afternoon, because we were just kicking it, like I showed them my portfolio in computer graphics class. Like, this is how bad it was. It's gotten better now, but like they had a PC and a Mac, and that was it, for a whole class. And and this substitute professor took us to his office. There's a guy named Paul Marco. I don't know if he's still doing this stuff or not. I lost contact with him, but he let us use his computer at work, and we used a software program called Topaz, which at the time AT&T had AT&T Labs, and the target image format came from them. They had Topaz, they had Tips, which was a paint program, and they had Rio, which was a vector, like typography program. And so we started learning Topaz and Tips. And this place that I went for the job interview, they had Tips. And so like the fact that I had a portfolio that they liked and that I knew Tips was all they needed, Right. And the whole time I was interviewing, I kept looking at people's eyes, waiting to see if they looked up at my hair, and like nobody looked at my hair while I was watching them, And but the thing that was funny about it was that I stayed there all day, and I started work on Monday. And so like I immediately got the job, and and I went home. I was like, I got the job, and then I promptly took out my cornrows because they were driving me nuts. It's funny because my friend's girlfriend saw me on campus, and like she just, because it took hours to do my hair, and she was not happy with me. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, because she did it super tight. My forehead was breaking out. My head was scalp position. I was like, I couldn't keep it. I wanted to. Right. It wasn't until years later that I'm what we call fondly tender scalped, or tender headed. Tender-headed.
Yeah. I was gonna say that. I was like, I'm confused. Tender-headed.
So years and years later, my wife, my amicably estranged wife, had a friend / hairdresser who did my hair, and it was hilarious because I'm sitting there like, ah! And my wife is just like, it was like evil villain, and that's, we're not together because of my late discoveries, and she's super supportive. She's amazing. She's an amazing woman, and I give her the vast majority of credit for making our 14-year-old an amazing young lady. But I basically started at this place. It was called Cinema Sound in Roslyn, Virginia, right across the street from the Iwo Jima Memorial. It was basically like an apartment complex, and they had like a suite of it was an office space, but like they had like 2 edit bays. They had Betacam, which was like the professional version of Betamax, and it's still around, even though Betamax isn't. They had 3/4, which those things were like, small books and that thick. And, they had this pop-up mechanism for where you put the tapes, and you put it in, and like, and like when you release it, it's like, but these huge things, and they had, at that time, there was no like real-time video. There was no, most computers didn't even have the ability to show more than like 256 colors, if that. And we had what they call a Lion Lamb and Minivas single frame controller. And for those who aren't familiar with that, it would basically, you had to have an expensive recorder that had what they call flying erase heads, I think. And it would basically just, the computer would load an image, which, now computers can render almost faster. Well, they can render real time. The image was like, that's loading. That's not rendering. Rendering was, you'd be days and days. But it would load an image in the on the what they call frame buffer, the image display, the special display, and the recorder would rewind, play and record 1 frame, and then rewind. The next image would load up, and it would, play and record. And so like 1 frame at a time, it was just putting down this animation, and like, it was like watching incredible grass grow. It was like the slowest process in the world, but you're like, I'm starting to see motion. Oh my God. Right. And I remember like we had a PC and we had an Amiga. And I did a lot of kind of paper cutout kind of thing, like the smear campaigns where they have like the newspaper headlines and it looks like somebody tore it off. I did a lot of that for clientele, but I had a lot of free time, and so I taught myself all the 3D software they had, most of which was on the Amiga. But the point is that I went back to school and I was like, I ain't never come back. I just left. I was like, I found, like, at that time, like, I was like, this is it. This is the holy grail. I'm just going to do 3D. I'm not going to even draw anymore, and that began my love-hate relationship with 3D, even like 32 years later, it's still kind of like, really? That's what we doing now?
Understandable. So what do you feel? Well, let me go through some of your projects first. And, IMDb sometimes doesn't have all of them, but I'm gonna, name some. So the first one that's on there is Apple Crumb Panic from 1992.
Yes.
And then let me run them off. So Star Wars Episode 1, Jedi Power Battles, the Powerpuff Girls movie, Matrix Revolution, Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed, Garfield, Exorcist: The Beginning, Elektra, Venom, Eon Flux, The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, 3-D, Monster House, I Am Legend, Speed Racer, Watchmen, G-Force, Iron Man 2, The Last of Us, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, Death Stranding, The Last of Us Part 2. So I'm sure there's many, many more, but those are some of the projects that you have worked on.
Yes. Yes. You want stories about noteworthy stories about them?
Yeah.
Okay, so Black Magic was this crazy crew of Black filmmakers that I met at Howard University, and I don't even remember how we met. I think somebody was in fine arts, and we were all sci-fi nerds, and they were all cooler than me in my opinion. But and Tim Wilson, who was one of the founding members, he's still operating under the Black Magic name. But yeah, like there was always this idea that, at some point, computer technology would be sophisticated enough for me to do something cool to put in one of the movies. In the meantime, I died a lot in their movies. I became adept at dying. And I mean, these guys were they were hardcore. They had squibs and everything, so blood spurt and, smoke come up and all that kind of stuff. And, I would basically be on long enough to die. Panic was one where finally, at my job, which was at that time a place called Cap Disc, it was a place that I went after Cinema Sound. We had this program, I think it was called Elastic Reality, and it might have been called something else before that. I don't even remember. At the time, it was like a fairly known developer, and it was on the Amiga, and then it jumped over to more mainstream computers. But it allowed you to do image manipulation, and it was specifically marketed for morphing, which was big at the time, black or white. God, Michael Jackson's video and the movie Willow. And so I was like, guys, I can do this thing. And we had a thing in this movie, Upbringing Panic, where is Tony Starnes, good friend of mine, father to my goddaughter. He was this beleaguered bike messenger, and it's just one of those. A funny thing happened to me on the way to my delivery, and at one point he gets chased by this car, and he nearly misses getting run over by the car, and the car crashes, and there's no driver. And in the back seat, there's one of those Jack in the Box, and it starts itself. And when it pops up, he's just looking at it oh my God. And when it pops up, it morphs into a hand and grabs his face. And I did the morphing, and I didn't know anything about anything. I did it at the wrong frame rate. So when they played it back, they had to slow it down, and all the grain and everything was just hi, and it was janky, to put it lightly. And I spent a couple of nights working on this thing, and after hours at work, and just killing myself to do it. In the meantime, they were doing all these other practical effects, and they had built this big Briareus inspired mech robot. For those who know Appleseed, we were all big on anime and manga at the time too, but they did this big, full size robot costume, and they had this scene where the robot's supposed to pass through the wall. The robot's Tony, it's supposed to pass through the wall. And what they did was they put the camera on a tripod, they shot the wall, they cut, and then I don't remember who it was in the suit, but he basically leaned against the wall and came forward and started walking, and they put an editing this flash. So it's see the wall, there's flash, and you see the robot come through. And I remember we had a screening, and like when the whole, like, you know, my scene came up, like I was like, you know, this is going to be fantastic, you know, and like just crickets. Mm-hmm. And then when this robot scene came, everybody's like, oh, and I was like, man, I did all that work and like I got nothing. They, you know, brilliant idea, well executed, but I'm like, the amount of effort that went into that versus the amount of effort that went into, I feel like Kanye. But but in the meantime, I did music on it. There's a guy named James Kinney who is now, like, you know, a very established musician, and he was doing most of the music. And I had a bunch of, like, I had my own Amiga by then. I had like the low end Amiga, and I had a keyboard that I'd bought, you know, and so it's like I do music too. And like, you know, they were like, yeah, bring all your stuff. So like we were in an edit bay, like in the middle of the night, you know, scoring this film. Like we did it over a weekend, so like the chase scene, I actually did the initial music for that. And then James, being an actual musician, came in and was like, oh, and we can do this, you know? And so like, you know, I made the foundation and then he made it truly cinematic. And like, it was really cool because it's like, yeah. And then like when it came time to do the credits, which I don't remember if Tim did them or if I did them, because the credits were like computer generated. I can't remember for sure. But they wanted like soundtrack music, you know, because back then, you know, you had this very clear distinction: score, soundtrack. You know, the soundtrack was the hit music and the score was the theatrical music. And so like James was like, well, you're better at that stuff. And so like I did the score, I mean the soundtrack music that played over the credits.
Nice.
But yeah, so with oh boy. What came after that? I'm not going to go into this much depth with everything.
A lot.
I mean, what was the next thing? Just
Star Wars.
Star Wars. Oh, that was cool. That was an interesting thing about that was that was for the PlayStation 1. And for that, back then I was what we called a generalist, which for a lot of people is a bad word. And so I got hired on as a modeler for that. Okay. And I modeled over half the character and creature models for the PlayStation game. And it was funny because like they're like, okay, you have to make Luke Skywalker. This was my test. You have to make Luke Skywalker with 200 polygons. And I was like, quads or tries? They were like, quads. And I'm like, 400 quads, I'm good, let's go, you know. And I got the job. But I was doing that, and then we were going to do Dreamcast, which had just came out from Sega. And a friend that I'd worked with previously, a guy named Ken Sullivan, he and I, you know, would always be working late. You know, we'd always be the last ones in the studio, and, you know, if we weren't working on work, we'd be working on our own things. And so like he went up and worked at Vinton's for a while, back before it became Leica. And he calls me one day and he's like, hey, remember how we always want to have our studio? I got somebody. I'm like, huh? He's like, I got somebody to run a studio. So, you know, he was like, when are you coming? When are you coming? When are you coming? When are you coming? He like moved close to me and, you know, got a house that was big enough to have a, you know, small studio in. And, you know, I was like, hey, I got to finish what I'm doing. He's like, you know, he's the kind of person who would just like, opportunity, I'm out, you know, and and so like I was like, no, I don't want to burn my bridges. He's like, you don't need any bridges. And you know, so but we transitioned to the Dreamcast, and at that point it was like, okay, this is a good time for me to leave. So I left and co-founded a studio called Savage Frog with him.
Nice.
That's how we got that's how I worked on the PlayStation movie, because the guy who was running the studio, I'm not going to give his name, that didn't go well. He had he went to Cal Arts. He had a lot of friends at Cal Arts, and he kept getting us these jobs doing 3D as 2D for Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. And for anyone who's done it, it's a fairly thankless job. One thing is, like, you've got this kind of battle between the artists and the money people. The artists wanted to look as much like hand-drawn, or at least back then, they wanted to look as much like hand-drawn stuff as possible. And the money people are like, we're paying a lot of money for this. It needs to look as slick as possible. And that's why you get stuff like Hercules, the Hydra. Like, if you see the original stuff for that, it's like, that looks like hand animation. At that time, nobody was doing that kind of stuff. And then you see it in the movie, and it's got shiny, surface, and you spin 360 degrees around. It's like, but yeah, we got along really well with the artists.
Yeah.
And not so well with management. And so like Powerpuff Girls, we did a few episodes. We did a few episodes of Dexter's Lab, and we did the movie, and like we had to do all this. Like we had a guy named Joe Angel, brilliant guy, was walk around in a trench coat with a whole bunch of gadgets under it, and it was like we'd always joke like, how do you get through the airport? But he wrote us a custom line shader, and like I used to always get mad because people would talk about like how hard it was to do cell shaded CG, and I'm like, it's like a feature in Lightwave. What do you shut up? Because everybody wanted, like, you had all these traditional animators, and they wanted like thin to thick lines. They wanted varying line weights and characteristics, and he wrote us this amazing plugin that gave us the ability to dial in all these characteristics. And it was really memory intensive. And because Powerpuff Girls was a film, the images were too big for us to use a plug-in. And we got this, I think it was Showtime animated series to work on after that. And we're like, finally, we're gonna get to use our plug-in. And because it was TV, it was like a lower resolution. And that's when they went to HD. And it's just like, so we never got to use this tool that Joe busted his butt to work on, and we paid for, and was amazing, But fast forwarding up to like I just jumped to The Last of Us. Oh no, I'm gonna jump to Iron Man 2 because I had worked at Sony Pictures Imageworks, and I worked with an amazing artist and animator named Scott Holmes, and I'm only dropping names of people that I like am close to, and it'll probably embarrass Scott, but I don't care. I love Scott dearly. He helped my career so much. But I was a lead on I Am Legend. Marco Marenghi was the supervisor on that, and at first I was like Louis Anderson on that. Like, you see this? I'm on fries. Before this, I was washing lettuce. I was like, he put me on birds. I did birds. He was like, okay, yeah, no, it's good. Like, and then he put me on, like, he basically just kept giving me more responsibility. And then I ended up being one of the 4 leads. And I ended up being referenced for a lot of the creatures. And like, there was a point where he and I were acting out like a battle. And I think this was still just like testing to kind of get a sense of stuff. And we just like went full bore, and people were like walking around like, what's going on? Like, they thought we were actually, like, they didn't know what was going on. It was funny as hell. But Scott was on my team. I had this amazing team of animators, and they're very gracious. My first time being a lead, at Savage Frog is a little different. My friend Ken and I were in charge of stuff, but everybody, worked as a very tight-knit team. But, Scott really liked working with me. He liked how I worked, and he recommended me to Double Negative. And so, Sony laid a whole bunch of people off, and by this time I'd been through layoffs at so many companies. I was just like, yeah, whatever. Okay. And so I think it was Framestore and Double Negative. There was a scheduling issue. So they ended up with the same time slot for interviews. And so it became them pitching their studios. And so it was four of us in the room instead of individual. And they're just like, no, we're better. No, we're better. But Scott was like, yeah, y'all need to hire this guy. And I ended up getting a call from the time of the interview to the time of the mixer that they had that night. I went from just one of the four people on the couch to people from Double Negative going oh yeah, we've heard about you, and blah blah blah, and next thing I know, I'm getting a call from Eamon Butler, who's a 10-year, who was a 10-year, he's still 10 years, he left after 10 years, Disney vet, and directed Chicken Little, and he's calling me, telling me about all the projects that he has that I could possibly work on, and he was like, I want you to start off with Iron Man 2, and I'm just like, yeah. Is this the right phone? But I went over to London. I was in London for 2 years, and it was my first time. It was Double Negative's first time working with Marvel. It was my first time being an animation supervisor. It was my first time working for Double Negative. First time being in London. A lot of firsts, and I was scared to death. I was kind of I would shrink down and be I would say as little as possible in reviews, and I did the original Suitcase Suit Up, and at the time we wanted to just get the blocking done, so we had this idea, we're just gonna animate the plates and get a sense of where they're going to go and how it's going to work. And we'll do what they call GAC. We'll put all the technological bits in after they buy off on it. And Favreau hated it because he was like, nah, I this is not Harry Potter. He was just like, no, I need to see how this is going to work. I need to believe it. And so that was pretty bad. And then on top of that, we had this footage of a stuntman who was supposed to, who was in place of Iron Man for the race. We did the Monaco race sequence, and the brief that we got was they love this stuntman. The suitcase suit is going to be more flexible and lightweight than the others, which theoretically is true. But we got this idea we were supposed to match the stunt guy exactly. And Victoria Alonso came over and just scared the bejesus out of a room full of grown men. We called her the Velvet Boot because she just this is what we're going to do. She was like, why shouldn't I take this work to someone else? And then she's like, she told my boss to fire me, and my boss was like, fortunately I had kept him in the loop on everything. I ruined his vacation because I was like, here's what's going on. This is this, that, and that. So when the crap hit the fan, he was like, no, you did everything you're supposed to do, and stood behind me, which was great. But I was so afraid. I had imposter syndrome. I had I had no idea that it was not only my right, but my responsibility to ask questions, and I just did what I was told, and, and never really spoke up. When Favreau came to the studio, I wasn't even in the meetings, and I didn't know that I could go, hey, I think I should be in these meetings, and at that point, I didn't think I should be in those meetings. So, but I won't go into more details about that, but it was grueling. And there were times where I was like, I can't get out of bed. I can't go to work. I was just so distraught and so worried. But I was also like, I can't fail. I got to do this.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we had a great team. And one of the things that really was helpful was that I was all about, I had 3 leads. I needed 4. I became one of my leads. I became all about, empowering everybody, checking in with them, letting them run with stuff, which a lot of them weren't even used to. And, just trying to maximize everybody's strengths, trying to help everybody where they were having issues. And also, more importantly, making people aware, like, we're a service provider. The animation team is a service provider within the company that's a service provider. We got to care about who's upstream and downstream from us. It's not just us. It's not just about us. And there was a huge schism at the time between, and I think there probably still is, between animation and VFX. But on that project, it's like, no, talk to this person. No, we need this by this time, and that really, I think, went a long way to helping get stuff done. We had a rigger, Danius Kavardis, who was like, he was, God, I'm trying to read. He was from Eastern Europe, and he had a thick accent, and like basically all the animators like, he's just going to say no. He's going to say no. And because I was a generalist, because I had some rigging background, I spoke his language a little bit, and so like, when he'd say no, it'd be like, I'd be like, well, what if we tried this? Or, that makes sense. However, like one of the big things was like, one of the huge things that got us through was like making deformations in the Iron Man suit, and he was like, no, I can't do that. He's just not doing it. And I'm like, I know, but no one's going to know. They're going to know. They're not going to know, and they didn't know. It wasn't obvious. But, like Danius would go like, no, that's not going to work. And then he'd come to me later and he'd be like, I did this for you. He was like, fucking A. He was a rock star. We had like, there's so many rock stars. I can't name everybody. So sorry, everybody. There were some amazing people. Amazing talent. But anyway, we got through it and everything went downhill from there. But
I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about, identity. So, what has been your journey with identity? Because I feel like that's very important.
So, thank you for asking that. I really appreciate that. Growing up, I was different in every way. I was different than everybody. Everybody. My core group of nerds and my core group of Jonin partners, they embraced me, but I was still so different from everybody. And, all I had as a role model for gender identity was, cisgender people who identified with the gender that they were assigned at birth, transgender women who were not even respected enough to be called something that wasn't offensive, and homosexuals and lesbians, which technically they're all homosexuals, and I don't mean that flippantly. So I was like, I'm none of those. I'm not attracted to men. I can't imagine having a relationship with a man, or I couldn't at that time. But homosexuality, like from a physical standpoint, I didn't have a problem with, and in some ways I was intrigued by. And I kind of had a performative reaction around other people because that was what everybody did, and it was terrible. But trans, I was like, I don't feel like a woman trapped in a man's body, and that's a very real thing. I was like, but that's not me. I was intrigued by transgender women. I was extremely intrigued by transgender women, and I just grew up being like, okay, I'm an exceptionally open-minded heterosexual male. And, in college, I met my wife, my, to-be wife. I was never good at dating. I was never good at, women, but I love women. I still love women. I remember in in elementary school, we had these folders that you could color in with markers. They sold the folders and they sold the markers. And I remember they had like a football folder, and then they had like this like 70s glam thing with these girls, and they had like the fingers like this that everybody draws, and like, Rodolphe, the guy who choreographed Kung Fu Panda fights, he like, don't draw that, but I wanted that folder. And I remember all the way back then, like the student who was running the store was like, you sure you want that folder? I'm like, yeah, I want that folder, and I had my folder, and I'm just like, I remember having like toe socks, the Bambi toe socks that I begged my parents to buy me. And I remember my friend, I was a latchkey kid with a friend of mine, Tommy Montague, and his sister. I had a huge crush on, and I'm not going to say which one. She wanted to see my toe socks, and I was so embarrassed. And she was like, "Oh, that's cute." And I was like, "Ooh, the girl I like said my toe socks are cute." But but yeah, I mean, I remember my mom and my wife were like, they talked more than I did. And I remember one time they were on the phone, and I picked up another phone, got on a call, and I don't know where this came from, but I was like, "Mom, why am I so gay?" And like, that kind of like, record scratch. And, then the conversation picked back up, and like, I remember going to see Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. Early on, I tried my mom's lipstick. I tried on pantyhose, I think, because people fetishize it. And so that was something that was kind of in the periphery. And, I was kind of like, but the older I got, the more enamored I was of women's fashion, and I was jealous of the amount of expression that women have. I mean, at the time, I didn't have a firm grip on, patriarchal politics, but, I still, to some degree, aside from, the male gaze, love that freedom of expression. And, I remember thinking, I wish that men were more comfortable with more things. And I mean, it wasn't like I wanted to wear a dress or anything like that. I just was like, like, I love sandals. And I'm like, it still is uncool in America for men to wear sandals, and it's like, I'm sorry, men. It's like there's some unwritten law that if you're going to wear sandals, they've got to be the ugliest sandals in the world, and they've got to show as little flesh as possible because, that's girl shit. I'm sorry. I've gone this far without cursing, and well, I curse like a sailor. Sorry, sailors. But yeah, so it wasn't until my mid to late 40s. I mean, first thing that happened, and it's kind of not something I'm proud of, but when I went to London, I was faithful, but I'm a huge flirt. I had like a few female friends that, like, we just had this connection. And, you know, to the point where people were like, yeah, that's not appropriate. You know, you're married, this, that, and the other. I'm like, we're not doing anything, you know, and I am very clear about being married. But my cousin lives in Germany, and a friend of his mom died. And they came to London because that's where his family was. And my friend was like, come meet my friend and, you know, hang out. And excuse me, I met this guy, and I'm just like, I was just totally smitten. And fast forward to like Oktoberfest, and like he made a move, and I just, that was it, you know, I was done. So it's like, okay, so by this time I had learned about like bisexuals, and I think I knew about pansexuals, but you know, basically somewhere along the line I was like, okay, I'm a pansexual, you know.
Can you define that for people?
Oh yeah, pansexual, it just means that I'm attracted to every gender. I haven't met a gender that I am not, you know, like, you know, some member of, I'm not, you know, I haven't been attracted to. I talked to my wife. I came clean about everything. And, you know, my wife, being the amazing person that she was, is, she was like, I'm going to tell your mama. and shortly after that, my mom passed, and I was like, did you tell my mama? But in all truth, you know, my mom would have supported me. I kind of regret that I didn't figure these things out until after she was gone. My father was like, yeah, you know, there are things about me that I don't understand, you know. It's like, that was like the conversation, you know. So, you know, my family embraced me, like, you know, my whole immediate family embraced me, and that was wonderful. But yeah, the thing, I started dating, and I met someone, you know, we got interested, got involved, got serious. And I guess this was around the time that 50 Shades of Grey was getting, you know, yeah, it had to be, because there was a dungeon in the area. You'd be surprised how many dungeons there are around. And they had a 50 Shades of training or something like that. And it basically was like, you spend a half hour with a professional dominatrix and a half hour on your own. And like the first half hour, the dominatrix is kind of showing you the ropes, and then the second half hour, you're doing your own thing. And my girlfriend decided she was going to feminize me. And so I was like, okay. And this time it was like, I like this. And like, I just like went off the deep end. I started buying like heels. I started buying dresses. I started buying all these, you know, feminine clothes. And we found a community of cross-dressers and trans women that, you know, went out a lot. And there was a whole thing, there was a whole development there. But the worst thing was that after I really went down the rabbit hole with all this, my then girlfriend let me know that she wasn't really into it. And so, you know, that was a little problematic. She still was supportive, and we stayed together. But, you know, there were a lot of issues, including that. Yeah, that's when I realized, okay, that's when, you know, like I'd become aware of non-binary people, and I was like, it was like a puzzle fell into place. It's like, that is what I am. I'm a pansexual, gender fluid person. You know, I don't hate the male aspects of me, except for the parts that you're supposed to hate. And, you know, I don't believe I'm not a woman, you know. You know, I'm something in between, and it's not fixed. Although I am very femme leaning, you know. sometimes I think people are like surprised because they'll meet me and I don't have any makeup on. I'm not in a dress or anything like that. And it's just like, my favorite memes now are the ones where it's like, I don't owe you androgyny. I don't owe you femininity. I don't owe you, it's like, okay. And there's this other thing that kind of happens that's really kind of, it's love-hate kind of scenario where old friends kind of come out of the woodwork and get in touch, and they basically casually interview you. They mine you for information and then fade back into the woodwork, and like on dating apps, I'd have women that would hit me up and they'd be like, well, I'm not attracted to you, but I love your energy and I want to hang out. And I think that they wanted me to be a gay BFF.
Yeah.
And, I'm not that. I'm like, first of all, I am attracted to you. And secondly, I'm not going to clutch the pearl. Right. I'm not going to be a stereotype. I mean, not that isn't genuine for some people. It's just not who I am. And I had a whole period of like trying to figure out how I wanted to present. I really wanted to be able to affect a natural feminine voice. And I have never felt comfortable practicing it at home. And so like, I kind of like, we're kind of halfway sort of, and half the time people don't realize that I was like speaking any differently than normal. So I was just like, okay, whatever. And then I just kind of embraced, this whole like nothing is what you expect. So, I'll be glammed up and still be like, yeah, so how's it going? So.
Yeah, that's a question I had of like, with people kind of stereotyping certain identities where if you go by they, them, they're like, oh, then you're like this. Or if you're non-binary, then you're like this. Or if you identify as more feminine when you were born a man, then you have to want to do this, this, and this. And it's just like, what is your message to people, like not putting even the out the box identities in a box? Like
So first of all, that's here. Half the time it's here where say what now? You wait, what? And I've had people be like, I don't get it. You're are you a man or a woman? It's like, that's like a classic, meme. Are you a boy or are you a girl? Yes. Are you a boy or are you a girl? Neither. But
and tell people why they don't really have to get it.
Well, I mean, it's the thing about it is, and this is something that I even say for animation, we're complex beings. Our society has so many nuances, so many elements, so many things, and we compartmentalize things. We shorthand everything. We categorize things to the closest that we can match to what we know. And like, it makes sense from the standpoint of being able to make sense of this vast world and everything in it. But it also kind of causes us to stop investigating. It causes us to stop actually evaluating things for what they are, rather than saying, well, it's like this, so I'm going to put it over here. And I mean, that happens in every aspect of our life, not just gender. It happens in animation all the flipping time.
The villain wears black. The hero has cornered chin or something like that.
Yeah. And, sadly, the black people are the bad guys, half the time, or the sidekicks. But even down to the animation technique, you get so many shorthands, it's like anybody who is embarrassed is doing this,
Yeah.
And it's like, investigate, try something different. How else can you say this? But, I would say take people at their word. They are who they say they are. Don't say preferred pronouns. They're not preferred. They're our pronouns. And I mean, people will find trans-identified people who fit what they expect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because there is no one way to be trans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what'll happen is people go, well, my friend is like this, so that's what it is. And it's like, no, that's
Right.
what a friend is. Just like cisgender people, just like heterosexual people, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you get women who, you know, don't fit the stereotypical femininity. You get men who don't fit the stereotypical masculinity. It's everything is diverse.
Yeah,
And
even something as simple as keeping my hair short is like, I very obviously look like a woman. Like
that
like,
blows my mind. That blows my mind. It's like anime. You know, I read somewhere that they make different colored hair so that you can identify the people from each other. Oh, it's the character with the green hair. Okay, you know, and it's like it's real. You know, it's like, oh, you're R&B. No, I'm neo soul. Oh, you.
But I feel like, you know, when you're in school or even in life, we learn, okay, when you're looking at complex things, you break it down into simple parts to understand it. But I feel like society goes to the extreme and then thinks complex things are now simple. And it's like, no,
Exactly.
That's how you understand them. But stuff can be complex. Like,
exactly. You know, and it's like, okay, so you had these two boxes and you are not willing to believe that there are any more boxes. You know, that's it for you.
Like I always say that there are like 2,000 like species plus species on the Galapagos Islands, but there's only two genders. Like, really?
Yeah. And then I mean,
or two ways to be.
How many you know, people politicize this stuff? How many people, you know, want to make a construct out of something that is fighting an established construct? You know. And then you look at the natural world, and there's so many things that defy our notions. You know, homosexual is unnatural. That's in the animal world too. You know, friggin' you got frogs that change. You got various animals that change gender in order to support what's needed in their, in their situation.
And there's so many cultures that, like, Native Americans have two-spirit, and I'm not sure of any other terms, but they're like respect amongst different cultures for like
India
I don't know the word.
They have what they consider a third gender, you know, and it's trans. I can't remember the term for it, but you know, that's the other thing is that people are like, oh, well, this is new. I'm not used to it, and it's like it's not new. It's new to you. Some of the terminology is new, and not even as much of the terminology as you believe is new. But you know, I mean, there's historical evidence of us, you know, going way back, and whether it's new or not, you know, respect the person who identifies this way. You know, there are plenty of things that actually are new that people embrace, and society moves on.
Right.
You know? And I do see positive movement in that regard, as far as I mean, definitely with the other parts of the LGBTQIA plus rainbow. But you know, even now with trans, but I mean, that's kind of a battle within a battle. You know, trans and having the trans binary to navigate.
Yeah.
You know, the majority of my trans friends are trans women, you know, or cross-dressers who, you know, some cross-dressers consider themselves trans, some don't. But which brings up another thing is sexual identity is not sexual orientation, is not sexuality, you know, and people have a hard time with that. You know, I think it's easier with something like homosexuality to, you know, that's considered both an identity and an orientation to some degree. You know, the gay community, you know, the lesbian community, you know, I mean, there's a community for everything, but that's where people's head is. So, you know, when you hear transgender, it's automatically, you know, lumped in with your sexuality, and it's not the same.
Yeah. I want to add. So some people think that there are too many labels out there, but can you give people a perspective of the importance of these labels that they might not think of as people who are like seemingly from the majority? Like, because you mentioned earlier, like it was a puzzle piece. So like, what is the importance of these labels to the people who have the labels?
On a lower level, kind of on a mainstream kind of everyday life level, everything we have is a label. Man didn't just come up, out of nowhere going fire, it was bright glowing thing, then it was bright glowing thing that hurts when you touch it. Then it was, so, I mean, these are all labels. It's all vocabulary. And while we use them as a shorthand, it's important to be able to expand that vocabulary. And so if we're going to continue to put everything in a box, it's useful to have more accurate boxes. So, it's like, it's not, and people often kind of feel like it's an attack. What I am has no direct bearing on what you are. I'm not trying to challenge your orientation. I'm not trying to challenge your gender. Just because I'm acknowledging the existence of something other than male and female doesn't make you any less male, doesn't make you any less female. So what's the problem? And we're not flipping converting people. I've been this way my entire life. I just didn't know what I was.
Right.
But the other thing is, like, in the case of people like me, I wouldn't give up my time with my wife for anything in my life. I would not give that up. I regret the pain that I caused her. I wouldn't give up my daughter for anything in the world. And there are times when I wonder what it would have been like if I had understood, who I was earlier. But I can't divorce that from the fact that my life has been so rich. I can't divorce that from the fact that I have benefited from male privilege. I can't divorce that from the fact that I've benefited from, sadly, colorism, But I think it's important for people to understand as early as possible this diversity and have these terms help people. Even if you're like, okay, well, that's a set of boxes that I don't even want to mess with. That's fine, but they exist.
Yeah, because the label isn't really for you, particularly if you don't want to do it. It's for the people whose label it is. And I feel like I remember being in high school and taking psychology, and I just was like, oh, I'm just learning labels for stuff that I already know about. So that's what these labels are. It's just like, it already exists. It just has a label. And now, because even if you're the most mainstream in all the labels, everybody feels like they're alone. So these labels help people not feel like they're alone. If you're not familiar with what you feel you are, you can now Google it because it has a label. It's so many things that make sense to me where people are like, yeah, it's not, why are we have so many labels? You don't have to actually learn the labels. It's not actually, if you are not invested in it, I guess you don't have to learn it. It's just for the person who's labeled it.
Yeah, it's not a spelling bee. You're not going to be asked to spell onomatopoeia, you use the vocabulary you need, but you don't say, well, these 5,000 words I know are the only words in existence. And you hit on something else that I thought was really, that made me think of something. But yeah, I mean, think about different languages. Different languages talk about the same things and they use completely different terminology. That doesn't make them any less what they are, auto, kurma, car, they're all the same damn thing, But yeah, I mean, this stuff it's really about acknowledging and having, an understanding, whether you like it or not, acknowledging that it's real. And the whole thing about children, whether or not they're old enough. I hope I'm running because everything's frozen on my side.
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay, good. Whether they're old enough to determine what their gender is, I mean, that's touchy. And I get, I can understand the dilemma there. But I don't think
it's also that's the connection of gender and sexuality. Well, where if people think that just because you're allowing them to choose their gender, that you're also opening their mind to sexuality, which is not necessarily the case.
I believe it's simpler than that. I believe it goes back to the boxes. You know, I know these boxes. You're trying to go into a box I don't know, so I don't know how to deal with that. The world clearly doesn't know how to deal with that. That's the person's perception. The world clearly doesn't know how to deal with this, and this is problematic. You know, this is not what I want, and that's a problem that parents have anyway. You know, your children are individuals. They need to be individuals. They don't need to be what you want them to be. You know?
Yeah, but also in the conversation of like, even if we make it simple of like being gay or lesbian, I feel like parents think, oh, if a child identifies as that, now they want to have sex. Like, no, they just know who they like now.
There's definitely that.
But then you sexualize like toddlers, where it's like, oh, that's their little girlfriend. Like, what? They're two.
We are a repressed society, and we really need to come to terms with our sexuality and our issues with it. I mean, there is no reason why children's Halloween costumes should be sexualized, and yet they are. You know, and we make light of the fact that, you know, little girls are put in makeup and heels and paraded around for judgment. You know, I mean, we've got some sick issues, you know, and you know, you go to Europe and watch TV and the violence gets banned, not the nudity, you know, and you know, and they have an understanding of sexuality versus, you know, physicality versus gender. Well, I would say to some degree, at least better than us, in my opinion.
So for you, what is the dichotomy of like personally getting closer to your true identity, but then like your personal feelings of whether that's refreshing or relief or something like that, but then the juxtaposition of having to interact in the world where it might not be as accepted? Like, what are your personal feelings, and then what is your feelings of interacting with the world?
One of the things that I've learned, and I don't believe this is true of everyone, but for me, I behave as I feel. This is normal. Everybody's not used to it, but this is who I am, and I'm going to present what I want to get back. So one of the things I don't do is I don't clock for clockers. Clockers are people who are looking at you trying to figure out what you are, or trying to, or deciding for themselves what you are. I don't look around to see who's looking at me, you know, and that's a hard bridge to cross, because, you know, when you first embrace, you know, your identity, it can be terrifying to step out into the world as your true self. And it took a while for me to get there. But yeah, I walk around like, you know, I at this point, I hardly even think about it unless I'm like of the binary. I usually don't even think about it. Like, and I smile and say hello to people, you know, and even if they're not smiling at me, I'll just be like, hey, how you doing? And just keep going, you know. And for the most part, people are cool with me. Like they, you know, like some people smile and say hi. Some people, every now and then somebody will ask me a question. But, you know, usually it's the people who ask me questions are people who I start to get to know. Um, you know, I was working down in San Diego for a long time, and I got to know the people at Starbucks because I was in there every day. And it wasn't until like I was like on a first name basis with people that the manager was like, "Can you help me out? Like, I want to know, you know, she basically, I think she had a question about pronouns, you know, how do I refer to you?" And she was very kind. She was very like, you know, it came from a place of wanting to understand. I will say that in general, you know, people kind of have a misunderstanding about what's appropriate and not appropriate as soon as you get out of those boxes that they know. You know, people will ask you anything, you know, I mean, like, that is completely inappropriate, and you wouldn't want ask a cisgender person the cis equivalent of that. So why are you asking me? Also, right. Google is a thing. Look it up. I don't mind people asking me questions. I don't even mind people asking me questions that they can look up. I do mind people assuming that it's my job to educate them. And I think that people need to understand, especially if there's somebody in their life, the best way to show that you care, the best way to show acceptance is to educate yourself, you know? And so, you know, the combination of learning for yourself and checking in, you know, that's cool, you know, just like the Black experience, you don't want people coming up to you like, so does your hairline grow like that? You know, I'm talking about people who actually have like a nice cut, you know, with a nice hair, like, you know.
For me, like, because there are the group of Black people who are like the intro to Black 101, but I'm like, okay, after you Google, ask me high level questions because I ain't trying to teach you the basics. Because there's Google. I'm like, there's Black people who will teach you the basics, but we need to go to high school, college, or PhD in race because, like, I'm not doing it.
You have to be at least this tall to ask this question. That was not meant to be a sizist slam. You know, which brings me to political correctness. People have a thing about political correctness being terrible. It's like the terrible thing about political correctness is that it's needed. You know, the terrible thing about political correctness is that it's performative. The ideas that political correctness is trying to uphold,
it's just being kind and respecting people.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with those things. What's wrong is pretending to do those things. What's wrong is having a problem with being asked to do those things.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you some rapid fire questions. So like maybe 2 minutes for each answer because I want to know your thoughts about this. So what are your thoughts about getting more content with Black characters in TV movies, non-binary, different identities? What are your thoughts?
We need everybody. You know, this world is full of people, and part of the reason why we have the ignorance that we have is because people are only exposed to stereotypes, or mostly exposed to stereotypes. And we need things that are really, you know, everything doesn't have to be about race. Everything doesn't have to be about gender. You know, we need more movies with, you know, Black people who just are people. It's great to embrace our culture and to showcase things about our culture, but everybody needs to be normalized. You know, people need to be identified as who they are as individuals, and we need entertainment that reflects that. You know, it shouldn't be a political statement. It shouldn't be a cliche. It shouldn't be a stereotype. You know, it should be diverse. You know, every race, every gender, every, you know, everything, every identity, everything needs to be embraced and respected, you know. And so many of our stories are not terribly gender specific or race specific, but we have this framework where everything has to be a white male, you know, and then a step down, a white female, you know, and it's like, you know, Beverly Hills Cop was written for Sly Stallone, you know, and Eddie Murphy killed that.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I'm guessing it was less comedic when it was Sly Stallone's, but still, you know, it was a great melding of comedy and, you know, action, you know. But, you know, the point is that, you know, people are people. So let's embrace humanity as opposed to the handful of boxes that, you know, we desperately need everybody to fit into.
As a veteran in the animation industry, what have you decided is your purpose in regard to, you know, Blackness, Black professionals in animation, maybe even mentoring non-binary people in animation? Like, have you decided?
I don't feel like there's anything to decide. I want to be I want to be the best representative for my intersections that I can be. But I want to be more than just a representative for my intersections. I want to, one of the things that really, really moves me and really reinforces my decisions is when other Black people, other trans people, you know, other people from the various intersections that I'm standing at say, you made me believe that it's possible. And I'm getting choked up. Being a positive example. I don't like the term role model because, you know, I'm far from that, but a positive example. You know, bringing light to people who think otherwise. People who assume stuff, and I dispel the notions that, you know, everything fits in that box that they thought I was. But, you know, I love helping people embrace animation, embrace their gifts, embrace being a human being. You know, there's nothing better than interacting with other people who are open-minded and eager to do something that they feel is worthwhile. I feel sorry.
It's totally fine.
I feel like it's an honor. I feel like I do feel like it's a responsibility in the best possible way. And for the most part, I believe it's a joyous thing.
What do you hope for the future? What do you hope? Well, what do you hope diverse animators do in the current landscape that either you wish you could have done or that you're currently doing? So we have all this technology, we have YouTube, you can be independent. Like, what do you hope people are out there doing with all this stuff that they have access to that you wish you probably would have had when you were younger?
Honestly, I think about that stuff sometimes. I think like, wow, you know, what could I have done if? But honestly, I would say that it's a timeless thing. It's not about where we are. It's about the constants. It's about the things that continue to resonate with us as human beings. You know, I always talk about focusing on the goal, focusing on the expectation, even focusing on how to avoid reactions that you don't want in your work. And I think that, you know, like, I mean, the more I grow, the more I learn about animation, the more I go back to, you know, traditional animation concepts and mentality, you know, minus the the racist misogynistic parts. There's so many things about humanity that remain worthwhile. And the thing that I would always tell people is to approach everything from different angles, investigate, learn. Everything is somehow interconnected, even things that are seemingly so disparate. You may do something that has nothing to do with animation, and when you come back to your animation, your perspective has changed in a way that you are no longer looking at your animation challenges in the same way.
Right.
Even if that's an indirect connection, it is still a connection. Not getting in the mindset of falling into checkboxes. This is what it takes. This is how long it takes. No. How much time do I have? What's the goal? How do I get there in the time I have? Who am I talking to? What's the language? What's the visual language? What's the cultural language? How do I respect my viewer and speak to them? How do I speak to a broader audience? How do I not alienate people outside of my target? All these things are not new. And I think, I used to have a tagline on my email that was, no one ever expected a pencil to draw. So, and it's less so now, but there's still this kind of notion that you get on the computer and computer does all the work.
Yeah.
That, you're good just because you're doing something. And it's like, even this kind of like, there's this notion, I see it a lot when people apply for jobs or talk about applying for jobs. There's this notion that everything comes from without. You're going to go to a big company and you're going to become great because you're at that big company. It's like, no, your greatness is proportional to how much you put into it.
That's what I learned the second 2 years of my college. Like the first 2 years of college was not as impactful as the second 2 years of college, where I kind of took hold of what do I want to learn in these classes.
Right. And what am I bringing to the table? A lot of people come and they go like, okay, tell me what I need to do. And it's like, no, you got to come knowing what you need to do.
Some people come bringing the bare minimum.
That's true. And that's part of knowing what you need to do. How much is enough? How much is too much? The more you learn about the successes and the failures and what made them successes and failures, the more you learn about people's work ethics, the more you learn, the more you can craft your own method and voice. And that's the most important thing. Be an individual. You made me think of something else, and I can't remember what it was. It was related directly, but I've been doing a lot of poetry, and I had a lot of imposter syndrome, and I've kind of been on the fence back and forth with everything I do, where it's like, how much do I need to know? How what don't I know? Is this going to be a problem because of what I don't know? And somebody said, don't worry about what you don't know. Just do. Disney said, keep moving forward. And those, I think, are really important. We get so caught up in, again, boxes and structures that we stay in boxes and structures. And we need to branch out.
That's my trouble with sculpting. I'm in a box. I'm struggling. But
we can talk about that. No, but Crown will kill me. I've got to stop telling people we can talk, because I'm supposed to send them to Crown and have people commission me. To give to share my pearls of wisdom.
But something you were talking earlier, and I was kind of visualizing different ways that people could animate or draw like non-binary androgynous characters, and then fast forward to what you were just saying now with the visual language. So it just made me think about how exciting it will be as more independent people produce work, like the different ways people would choose to communicate that visual language of what does an androgynous character look like, what does a non-binary character look like, because it is going to be new visual language, because there's so much stuff that's just like, oh, this is how we do this is how we do that. So it just made me think, when you were talking about visual language, of like, ooh, this is going to be exciting, how like different people will approach whether they choose to identify the person on screen as what they are, or they don't. But it'll be cool, the diversity in it.
Well, that's one of the trickiest bits about it, is that you don't depict them in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a meme, another meme that I love, along the lines of, I don't owe you androgyny. It's, what is, for talking to a non-binary person who has imposter syndrome, what does a non-binary person look like? And the answer is, it looks like you.
Right.
However you present,
yeah,
you are non-binary. How you dress, how you look, that doesn't make you who you are. A cisgender person hasn't changed gender because they dress more or less, gender oriented, And so, like, I know non-binary people who present as the gender they were assigned at birth, but they're still non-binary people. So, what I would say is, what is the purpose in the story? Is there a reason to specifically depict them a certain way?
Yeah, that's what's going to be exciting about it. Some people are going to be like, okay, this character, this is how they dress, and this character, this is how they dress. So it's going to just be a variety and a diversity.
Absolutely.
So a little bit of a callback quickly. You said that because even though you've been an animation supervisor, you said you haven't gotten better with the idea of deadlines. So what are your fail safes that you put in place to be like a leader, but also suck at deadlines?
It's how they say it's tough to take, it's easier to give advice than it is to take it, or that, you can't take your own advice. I think that's it more than anything. And I think that, people who look at me and listen to me may think I'm a fraud. But the reason why I believe firmly in what I say is because, I learned it from successful people. That helped give me the confidence to tell other people, this is how it's done. And I'm really quick to say, this isn't the only way it's done. I say, this is the way I've seen it succeed.
Right.
Every time that I fail, it's like, I know I should have done this and this and this and this. My inner August is like, why are you doing it that way? But I also I try and encourage people. I'm very big on the teach a person how to fish instead of giving them a fish. Yeah. So for me, I'm like, this is what I have seen work. I'm all for you coming up with or having another way.
Right.
All I care about is that we make it to that destination without anybody getting hurt. And that, if we don't have time on the clock, we at least didn't go over.
Yeah.
And that changes you, and I can say whether or not I'm following those, I have gotten better. For me, it's kind of like that thing where, I don't know if anybody else had this, but, I used to, hit snooze and sleep through the day, which is kind of close to what I did today, but not quite. And I got to a point where I put my alarm clock across the room. So I physically had to get up out of bed to turn it off. So I at least had a 75% chance of not getting back in bed. So, it's all about finding what works for you. It's all about being realistic about what you're doing and checking, I thought this was going to work this way. It didn't. Where am I in time? Is there something I can do that is more likely to succeed? Should I stick with this? Constantly having that dialogue between you and time. And one of the things that I tell people that helps me when I do get lost in my failure to follow my own advice is, I keep talking about boxes and checklists, but if you say I identify these things as being necessary to get to my goal, then you can go in and make a focused list, and you're looking at that clock going like, okay, I did this. Don't make it perfect. Don't do 5 revisions of it. I did this, do the next thing. Just keep looking at a clock and go like, all right, I'm halfway down my list. I need to pick up the pace. And that goes a long way. Anything else, you have to talk to Crown, and we can set up a time. And
So last question, if someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in animation?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question, and it's hard to answer. I think my first thought was it depends on what I've achieved and what people know about me. But I would say that a good filmmaker will make that important to the viewer regardless of what they know. I would want them to focus on my failures as much as my successes. I always say if the road to hell, if good intention is the road to hell, I'm driving a steamroller. So, this whole struggle of intention versus effort versus results, that is a continuing theme in my life, and there's a very big part of me that was steeped in fairness, and the world's not fair. And the best thing you can do is understand how to deal with that, and hopefully how to deal with that in a positive way. I would love for a story about me to show that struggle, and to be honest about the fact that I'm not there yet. The things that the responsibilities that I've run away from, in addition to the ones that I have managed,
So where can people find your work, and where can people follow you on social media?
I believe they can find all of that on AugustAlondraOfficial.com. Thank you, Brown. I think everything is there. We have links to my animation, to my 2D and 3D art. We don't have poetry yet. We don't have music yet, but I'm being a little protective of that. I mean, there's some of those things there I'm going to keep for myself and maybe a very select audience. But yeah, we have like connection to my merch. We're trying to kind of consolidate it because it's all over the place. So yeah, AugustAlondraOfficial.com. Let me double check that that's right. It's like having your own, like knowing your own phone number. I never call myself.
Right. I think that or AugustAlondraArt.com, or is that a?
Hold on a sec. It might be art. You might be right. Yeah. See, I'm glad I checked. I'm glad that you checked. I'm sure Crown is like face palming right now. Yeah, AugustAlondraArt.com.
Cool.
Don't edit out the part where I didn't know my own website.
All right, I won't, because I was planning on it. But anyway, thank you, August, for coming on my platform. Thank you for allowing me to highlight you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time, and I love what you do.
So everyone out there, I want you to like so I know it's real. Comment and tell me how you feel. Subscribe to Seal the Deal and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Bars.